The Light, May 2017. International organ of the Center for the Worldwide Ahmadiyya Anjuman Isha'at Islam. We broadcast on Radio Virtual Mosque. Editors of The Light: Shahid Aziz and Mustaq Ali, UK. Zainab Ahmed, USA. Gauzia Salim, India. Contents of The Light for May 2017. The Call of the Messiah. Secret of Success by Mustaq Ali. Islam and Zoroastrianism by Ardeshir Spencer. The chapter Hijr of the Holy Quran. By Zainab Ahmed. 1. The Call of the Messiah. By Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmed. The Promised Messiah and Mahdi. Exhortation to the rich and wealthy. O you the rich, the kings, the millionaires, there are few among you who fear Allah and remain truthful and steadfast in all His ways. Most are such that they attach their hearts to the riches of this world, and spend all their lives in this obsession without giving any thought to death. Every rich man who does not address himself to Allah in prayer, whose attitude to Allah is one of carelessness, will bear the sins of all those connected with him. Every rich man who drinks will bear the sin of all those under him who drink with him. O wise ones! This world will not last forever. Take hold of yourself and be steady. Give up every excess. Leave all intoxicants. Wines, beer, whiskey, and the like are not the only harmful drinks. Opium, marijuana, charas, banag, tari, and all other intoxicants to which you become addicted all have a deadly effect on the brain and ultimately prove fatal. You should keep away from all such things. In fact, we cannot understand at all how and why you make the use of such things a habit. Things which, in front of your own eyes, every year ruin thousands of people and even bring about their death. While the punishment to come in the hereafter is something different and in addition to the harm which goes with these things here. Become righteous and God-fearing, so that you should live longer, and be blessed by Allah. Overindulgence in luxurious, easy, irresponsible living is a curse because as it is disrespectful and cruel to be indifferent to the suffering of others. Every rich man is as answerable for properly carrying out his obligations to his Creator and his fellow men as is a poor man. In fact, a rich man is even more answerable. Indeed, how unfortunate is he, who for the sake of this brief life in this world, completely turns away from Allah. The one who uses forbidden things with such audacity as if they were quite lawful, who, when angry, fulminates against people like a madman, using abusive language, ready to wound and kill, and who, in the quest of his lust, becomes brazen to the extreme. Such a one will never know real success. My dear people, you are in this world only for a short time, of which a large part has already passed. Do not displease your master. Even a temporal government, if displeased with you, can destroy you. Therefore, how much more is it incumbent on you not to displease your Creator? No one can destroy you if you are held righteous in the eyes of the Lord. He, Himself, will protect you, and no enemy thirsting for your blood will be able to harm you. Otherwise, there is no protection for you, and you will have to live in constant fear of your enemies, uneasy and restless and full of forebodings, and the later days of your lives will pass in great anguish of mind. Allah, Himself, becomes the protection of those who stand with Him. Therefore, come to Him and leave off all kinds of opposition to Him. Never be negligent in fulfilling the obligations He has laid on you. Never oppress His creatures with hand or word of mouth, and always remain in fear of the wrath of heaven, for herein lies the only way to salvation. To the learned people of Islam. O you learned people among the Muslims! Do not be hasty in rejecting me as false. There are many profound secrets which man cannot comprehend in a hurry or all at once. You should not be ready to reject a thing the moment you hear it, for this is not the way of the righteous. Had there been no fault in you, and if you had not interpreted certain sayings of the Holy Prophet in a manner contrary to their real meaning, then the advent of the Messiah, as a judge and arbitrator among you, would not have been necessary. The mission you assign to this advent, namely, that he will join forces with the Mahdi to make war on all to convert them forcibly to Islam, is a belief which brings disgrace to our religion. Where, in the name of goodness, is it written in the Quran that war is permissible for the sake of spreading one's religion by force? On the contrary, we find Allah saying in the Holy Book, there is no compulsion in matters connected with religion, 2:256. So, where will the Messiah, son of Mary, get the right to use force to convert people to Islam? The entire Quran is replete with verses teaching us that there can be no compulsion in religion, and it is clear on the point that when the Holy Prophet took up the sword, he did not do so to spread Islam by this means but only for the following reasons. 1. As aiding punishment for those who had killed large numbers of Muslims, and had driven out many others from their homes without just cause. We read in the Holy Book permission has been given to those who ght because they had been oppressed, and Allah indeed has the power to help them, 22:39, despite the odds against them. 2. Or, those wars were defensive and were waged against people who were leaving no stone unturned to destroy Islam and to stop its propagation, and were using the sword to do so. 3. Or, they were fought to assert legitimate freedoms. Apart from campaigns undertaken for these three aims, the Holy Prophet, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and his blessed immediate successors fought no war, whatsoever. In fact, before taking up arms in self-defense, Islam bore oppression with silent fortitude to such an extent that there is no example in the history of other peoples of such forbearance. Then, what kind of a Messiah and Mahdi will these be who will embark on their mission by putting their opponents to the sword right from the start? End of extract from Kishti-i-na Noah's Ark, continued in the next issue. Secret of Success. By Mr. Mustaq Ali. And obey Allah and His Messenger, and do not dispute, with one another, lest you lose courage and your strength depart, and be patient. Surely, Allah is with those who are as-sabirin, the patient. 846. My short talk today is taken from of the Quran entitled, Success Does Not Depend on Numbers. I thought that it is an interesting subheading of the chapter Al-Anfal Voluntary Gifts, which also means spoils of war. This chapter deals with the Battle of Badr, the first battle that the Muslims had to fight. It was fought on March 13, 624, CE, so in a few days will be the anniversary of this battle. Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali used the literal meaning of the Arabic word anfal and gave the title Voluntary Gifts to the chapter because the Muslim state at that time did not have an arsenal, treasury, or army. So, the money and manpower required to defend themselves were voluntary. Their possessions and their life was offered for this battle as voluntary gift to defend this new ideology, oneness of God, and a prophet whose character earned him the titles Al-Amin and as-Sadiq, the trustworthy and the truthful. It is important to note a few facts about this battle. The Muslims were 313 in number and had no trained personnel with no sophisticated weaponry. Unlike the Quraysh, who were 1,200 in number and had horses and camels. The Muslim army consisted of untrained youth and a few elderly members. The outcome of this battle was victory for the Muslims despite a small number of them fought against a mighty and well-equipped Quraysh army, and thus set the stage for one section of this chapter entitled Success Does Not Depend on Numbers. A look at history. History bears testimony to the fact that success does not depend on numbers. Let us look at Abraham who, single-handed, stood up to his father and his community. The Holy Quran tells us, and when his Lord tried Abraham with certain commands he fulfilled them. He said, Surely, I will make thee a leader of men. Abraham said, And of my offspring? My covenant does not include the wrongdoers, said he. Today the Abrahamic faiths represent almost half of the population of the world in numbers. So, Allah fulfilled his promise to Abraham when he said, Surely, I will make thee a leader of men. Abraham started alone, but he was successful in the end. His success did not depend on numbers. Jesus was rejected by his people and had to undergo public humiliation and attempted murder. He also came to tell the children of Israel, The Lord thy God is one. Deuteronomy 6:4. While they were happy to accept God as one, but when he told them he was the Messiah sent to lead them to victory, they humiliated him. He was successful in the end, but his congregation was small in numbers. Noah, like the other prophets mentioned above, experienced the same rejection. His message and mission was rejected by his people, ch 26 v 105, but they called him a liar, so we delivered him and those with him in the ark. Ch 11 v 40, and they believed not with him but a few. Even his son publicly rejected him and the message he brought to the people of Moses. Thus, we read in the Quran, and Noah called out to his son, and he was aloof, O my son, embark with us and be not with the disbelievers. We all know the outcome of the son, i.e. he drowned. Of interest in the story of Noah is his calling upon Allah to save his son, as any of us will do even when our children are in the wrong, but in the response of Allah is a lesson for us. Allah said, O Noah, he is not of thy family, he is an embodiment of unrighteous conduct. So, ask not of me that of which thou hast no knowledge. I admonish thee lest thou be of the ignorant. Ch 11 v 46. Muhammad, like Jesus and Abraham before him, was rejected by his own people. Attempts were made on his life, he was boycotted with respect to trade and politically isolated. He commenced his mission with the support of his wife and cousin and a handful of followers, but lived to retake his ancestral home without resistance. His famous words of steadfastness were, if you put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, I will never give up the preaching of Islam. Continuing with the trend of rejection. In Matthew 21:42, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, is spoken of as the stone the builders rejected. Jesus said to them, have you never read in the scriptures, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? This is from the Lord, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. So, have we figured it out yet? The formula for success is that small numbers are rejected by the masses and family, but steadfastness in the cause of the truth achieves success. Admonition from the Reformer of the Age. This Reformer of the Age, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, has written, my followers will be prevented from fulfilling many of their aspirations, but be not heavy-hearted. O my friends who have entered a covenant with me, may God enable me and you to such things as would please Him. Today you are small in numbers and are being treated with contempt. You are passing through a great period of trial. You will be harassed in every way and you will have to bear with all manners of talk. Each one of those who inflict misery upon you with his tongue or with his hands will do it in the belief that he is doing it in the service of Islam. You will also be tried from heaven, so that you are tried in every possible way. For you the road to victory does not lie in dry logic or in returning abuse with abuse. God Almighty looks down and loathes upon this behavior. Isaiah Abraham, p. 546-547. This Jamaat, the Ayil UK, is one of the smallest in numbers. We are rejected every day because of our stance to hold religion above the world, but we remain a thorn in the side of those who pretend that religion is first in their life. Those who reject us are the ones who cast doubts into the minds of men, but they could not do this to the elders of our Jamaat, as they possessed a different kind of steadfastness and conviction. They were not easily swayed by the promise of worldly gains, and they worked with zealousness for the emancipation of the truth and the elimination of falsehood. Why don't we have the same success? We are small in numbers but great in means. Where is our success? None of us is hard up for a few bob. The stories I have read about the friends of the promised Messiah was that sometimes they did not have food in their house. Our numbers are small, our doctrine is the same, our rejection is greater, so what is lacking is our steadfastness. We are too easily swayed by those in authority and even family, and thus our power to love and stand by each other depreciates and weakens us. This is what the verse of the Quran means when it states, do not dispute with each other lest you lose courage and your strength departs. When this happens, then communities fall apart, Jamaats split and battles are lost. Central to the avoidance of this sort of breakdown is love for each other and love for the Quran. This is the unique characteristic of the promised Messiah, i.e. his love for the Quran. This led him to write a couplet which we all know, which means, the elegance and beauty of the Quran is the life of every Muslim. And, it is said that Joseph's beauty had exceptional charm, but the Quran has surpassed everyone else in elegance and attractiveness. We need to hold fast to the rope of Allah and be not disunited. As a Jamaat we need to have the same goals and focus. We are admonished elsewhere in the Quran about another aspect of our being and that causes the loss of love amongst us, and that is fault-finding. Oh, you who believe, let not people laugh at people, perchance they may be better than they, nor let women laugh at women, perchance they may be better than they. Neither find fault with your own people nor call one another by nicknames. Evil is a bad name after faith, and whoso turns not these it is that are the iniquitous. Ch 49 v 11. Finding fault with each other is the cornerstone of a weak-hearted person who does not have the courage to correct themselves but sees it fit to spot the weakness or fault in someone else. The Bible beautifully elucidates this in, "Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote of thy brother's eye." Matthew 7 v 5. In the hadith of Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi, our Prophet says, "Each of you is the mirror of his brother, so if he sees any fault in him he should wipe it away." Al-Tirmidhi, Hadith 1286. Narrated Abu Barza al-Islami, the Prophet, said, "O community of people, who believed by their tongue, and belief did not enter their hearts, do not backbite Muslims, and do not search for their faults, for if anyone searches for their faults, Allah will search for his fault, and if Allah searches for the fault of anyone, he disgraces him in his house." Sunan of Abu Dawud, number 2283. What harm can come because of fault-finding? The Prophet said, "Beware of suspicion, for suspicion is the worst of false tales, and do not look for the other's faults, and do not spy, and do not be jealous of one another, and do not cut your relationship with one another, and do not hate one another, and O Allah's worshippers, be brothers, as Allah has ordered you." Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 8 number 90. If Allah mentions this trait of human frailty in us, if our Prophet warns us against it, then surely it must affect us in some way. Psychologist Dr. Joseph M. Carver, Ph.D. wrote about the psychology of fault-finding, "No person on earth is perfect and everyone has flaws and faults. This means that eventually you will find fault with everyone around you, and by your own admission, you will then not only dislike them, but dislike being around them. They will irritate you. You will eventually reach a point where you are uncomfortable in any social environment, because someone there will have a flaw. Keep in mind that being imperfect and having a flaw is only by your interpretation of what you see. Those you identify as being imperfect and having flaws cause you emotional distress. You not only dislike, a negative emotional state, being around them, but find them irritating. Your mood will be constantly changing, always to the negative based on those around you. As this happens, your current friends will slowly detach from you, you will interpret that detachment as a flaw, you'll then dislike them, and you'll be lonely. This current personality theme has no positive impact on your life. In an ironic twist, your need to find fault with people for failing your personal standards of perfection, then allowing yourself to be emotionally upset by them, is a significant flaw in your personality. Perhaps the biggest irony is that your friends, who probably experience your moods, negativity, and frequent criticism of those around you, accept your flaws and imperfection and remain your friends. This negativity puts you at higher risk for depression, stress, anxiety, and even job/career loss. In the future, this is not a good characteristic to have for many reasons. Under stress, our natural personality is amplified. Dependent people become more dependent and aggressive people become more aggressive, that kind of thing. Your hypercritical view of others, when you find yourself under stress, will be amplified, isolating you from those around you and eventually turning on you, becoming self-critical. This negativity puts you at higher risk for depression, stress, anxiety, and even job/career loss. To prevent ourselves from falling into the cycle of suspicion, fault-finding and dissent, remember the 6 C's. Always compliment, congratulate and commend, never should we complain, criticize, and have contempt. The price we must pay now for success tomorrow is, that we remain steadfast and unrelenting in our duty to Allah and not find fault with each other. Islam and Zoroastrianism. By Ardeshir Spencer. Editor's note: this article by a Zoroastrian compares Islamic and Zoroastrian religious practice. The author's object is to try to show that Islam copied its practices from Zoroastrianism. However, the Holy Quran says, and surely the same is in the scriptures of the ancients. The Holy Quran, 26:196, Islam is not a new religion but perfects all earlier religions. It would be appropriate if we can discuss the startling similarities between some practices of Islam and Zoroastrianism. These parallels go beyond coincident. I will endeavor to enumerate a few here. Requirements of prayers: Islam enjoins its followers to pray 5 times a day and is called by the muezzin to his prayers. These prayers are at I, dawn 2, noon 3, afternoon 4, sunset v, night 01. Zoroastrianism also enjoins prayers 5 times a day called gay. The devotee is summoned by the ringing of a bell in the Adishbiram/Ajri. These prayers are also at the same time as in Islam and their respective names are Islamic time, Zoroastrianism, Fajr, dawn, Havan, Zohar, noon, Rapathwan, Asr, afternoon, Huziran, Maghrib, evening, Mazrim, Isha, nighttime, Ashain. 02. Prerequisites of prayer: on entering the mosque and prior to commencing prayers, a Muslim must cover his head and wash his face and limbs. Similarly, a Zoroastrian on entering the Ajri will cover his head, wash his face and limbs and perform the Padiyab Kusti before commencing his prayers. 03. The prayers in Islam are in Arabic only, though translations/transliterations are available. The liturgy must be conducted in Arabic only. In Zoroastrianism too, prayers must be recited in Avesta or in Pazend only. In fact, in Aviatan prayers Pazend portions must be recited in an undertone so as not to break the seamless flow of Avestan Mantravani. 04. Sanctum Sanctorum and its veneration: the holiest spot in a mosque is the wall facing Mecca and is called the Qibla. In the Adishbiram/Ajri, the room where the Adish Padshah is enthroned is also called the Qibla. A Muslim will perform the sajda in front of the Qibla, and so also will the Zoroastrian perform the sejda before his Qibla. Both involve kneeling and touching the forehead to the ground. 05. A holy month: in Islam, Ramzan is the holy month in which all Muslims are required to fast in the day and only break their fast after sunset. In Zoroastrianism, the month of Bahman has similar connotations wherein all are requested to particularly abstain from flesh. Perhaps in the age of the Sasanian dynasty the month of Bahman was observed as Ramzan is now. 06. Ascent into heaven: the hagiography of Islam assures us that Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven from Jerusalem on the mythical beast Buraq. He crossed the 7 spheres, exchanged greetings with the patriarchs and beheld the glory of God. The Dinkard tells us that at the entreaties of Asho Zarathustra, Bahman Amishaspan transcendentally elevated his consciousness to the realm of heaven, wherein Asho Zarathustra looked at the refulgent majesty of God. A similar journey was attributed to the virtuous Ardavarath, who visited hell, purgatory, and heaven during his spiritual journey. The above similarities are obvious. A more careful research would reveal more parallels. However, even these points are too close to be dismissed as mere coincidences. This means Zoroastrianism has had an enormous impact on Islam which is not acknowledged. Everyone agrees Islam owes a lot to Judaism and Christianity, but I feel that the scholars of Islam borrowed very heavily from Iran, and this can be perhaps attributed to that shadowy figure of Dastur Dinyar, Salman Farsi. This debt is so impressive that it had to be consistently downgraded and later denied. After all, if Islam is supposedly directly inspired by God, it cannot be seen to be acknowledging any debt to an older faith, especially the faith of a nation which Islam has defeated. This may perhaps explain the devotion of your Persian imams to my faith. 07. Chinvat Bridge: the Sirat Bridge. According to ancient Persian myth, when a person dies, the soul remains by the body for 3 days. On the 4th, it travels to Chinvat Bridge, the bridge of the separator, also called Al-Sirat, accompanied by gods of protection. The bridge is finer than a hair and sharper than a sword and spans a deep chasm teeming with monsters. On the other side of the bridge is the gateway to paradise. 08 Hell, demons guard the foot of the bridge and argue with the gods over the soul's fate. The actions of the dead person, both good and bad, are weighed, and the soul is either allowed to cross or denied access to the bridge. Spirits whose evil outweighs their good fall into the demon-infested pit to face eternal torment. In this abyss of the damned, each soul is tortured by a ghoul that represents its sins in life. Once fallen into the gulf, no soul can escape the horrors of hell through its own power. Zoroaster, a 6th century BC religious leader, had warned his followers of this obstacle to heaven, but he promised to lead his flock safely across. The ancient manuscript Gathas, Songs of Zoroaster, explains that the bridge of the separator becomes narrow for the wicked, whereas the holy can easily pass unharmed. In Gathas, the fair god Rashnu is named as the judge who helps determine who is worthy of salvation and who must be damned. All infidels, non-believers, fall into hell, which the prophet says has been created especially for the followers of the lie. The legends are sketchy but assert that Chinvat Bridge is located somewhere in the far north. It is a place of filth where the damned endure physical tortures and spiritual agony. Souls who are unsuccessful in crossing the Chinvat Bridge suffer these torments until Ahriman, the evil god of Zoroastrianism, is destroyed by the good god Ortmod during the Last Judgment. At this time, lost spirits are restored to the truth since the lie has been eradicated, or they face final annihilation. The 5 ritual Zoroastrian prayers. The 5 prayers were developed after the prophet Zoroaster. 1. There are 3 grades of the sacred fire: a. the sacred fire of the Adishbiram, b. that of the Adish, Adaran, and c. that of the Adish Daja. These 3 have their different rituals of consecration and different rituals for the daily prayers at the 5 times, Gauss, of the day, when they are fed with fresh fuel. We will, at first, speak of the process of consecrating these 3 grades of the sacred fire. For example, he falls on his knees in his prayers, he lowers his head and bows, he raises his hands towards heaven. All these ways or rites, which symbolize service or obedience or homage to God, are done occasionally. The candidate is to say his prayers 5 times during the day. He is expected to pass his time in a religious or pious mood. The candidate has, during these 6 days, to pass his time in prayers during the 5 Gauss and to observe all the observances of saying the grace at meals, etc. He is not to come into contact with any non-Zoroastrian. The 5 periods for the performance of the ceremony. The Bui ceremony is performed 5 times every day. It is performed at the commencement of each of the 5 Gauss or periods of the day, which correspond to a certain extent with the canonical hours of the Christians. These periods are the following. 1. Hawan. It begins from early morning when the stars begin to cease to appear, and lasts up to 12 o'clock when the sun comes overhead. Literally, it means the time when the ceremony of pounding the hauma is performed. 2. Rapathwin. It runs from 12 o'clock noon to 3 p.m. Literally, it means the pithwa, or the middle part of the day, ayar. 3. Duzaran. It runs from 3 p.m. to the time when the stars begin to appear. Literally, it means the time of the advancement of the sun. 4. Iwasruthrem. It runs from nightfall to midnight. 5. Ushahin. It runs from midnight to dawn when the stars begin to cease to appear. The priest performs the kustipadiyab, i.e., performs ablutions and unties and puts on the kusti again with the recital of a prayer. The Bui ceremony in an Adishbiram, a priest who has performed the Kub ceremony, performs the kustipadiyab at the commencement of each new ga, i.e., the period of the day, as described above, and then recites his farziyat, i.e., the necessary prayers, which are the srashbach, the ga according to the time of the day, and the Kwarshed and Mir Naishas during the day periods, i.e., the above-named first 3 gas. During the night periods which form the last 2 gas, the Kwarshed and Mir Naishas are replaced by Srashyasht, Yasna 57, and Srashhadukt. He then goes into the sacred chamber, puts on white gloves, places some frankincense over the sacred fire, and then the maki, i.e., the 6 pieces of sandalwood as said above. If sandalwood is not obtainable, 6 pieces of any other kind of clean good wood will do. The Religious Ceremonies and Customs of the Parsis by J. J. Modi, Bombay, 1922. Part 3. Surah Hijr, The Rock. Reflections on Section 1. By Zainab Ahmed. The name given to the 15th Surah of the Quran may be understood in various ways. It could refer to the dwellers of the rock, mentioned in verse 80 of the Surah. The ruins of Petra, as they are now called, were the dwellings of the nation of Thamud, or the Nabateans, presently found in Jordan. The Prophet Salih was sent to this nation, who were eventually destroyed for persistent wickedness. These ruins were on the route of trade caravans to Syria in the time of the blessed Prophet Muhammad. It must have served as a powerful message to the people of those times, as shown by this hadith. The Messenger of Allah passed through Al-Hijr on his way to Tabuk. He covered his head and urged his camel to go faster, saying to his companions, "Do not enter the dwellings of those who were punished unless you are weeping, and if you do not weep then make yourself weep out of fear that perhaps what struck them may also strike you." Bukhari. The concept of Hijr, or rock, invites reflection upon the rock cycle, a scientific process through which various types of rock are formed and broken down. There are 3 main types of rocks: igneous, or rocks formed when magma flows out as lava, and cools, sedimentary, formed when rocks are broken down by weathering and erosion and then compacted together, and metamorphic, which are formed when rocks are exposed to heat and pressure, and they melt and change form. Reference is made to the changing forms of rocks in 2:74. Then your hearts hardened after that, so that they were like rocks, rather worse in hardness. And surely there are some rocks from which streams burst forth, and there are some of them which split asunder so water flows from them, and there are some of them which fall down for the fear of Allah. And Allah is not heedless of what you do. If we consider rocks to be like the hearts of people, or simply as types of people, we can say that while we are all subject to challenges in life, they change us in different ways, depending on how we react. We can turn into precious stones as a result of the tribulations we persevered against. We can also crumble under the stress. Overall, we can conclude that everything is changing. Even something apparently immovable and unyielding as a rock, is undergoing constant change. The sand particles that we see once used to be mighty rocks. Similarly, are giant obstacles removed and the mighty reduced to humility. To summarize, rocks can be a metaphor for the human heart, for faith, for the changes we undergo in life, and for the obstacles that we face in the path of our goals. This surah continues the themes of Surah Ibrahim, strengthening the faith of the believers by reinforcing important faith concepts, giving them examples of people who followed those concepts and lead a godly life, while warning those who rebel to the point of harming the progress of goodness. 1. I Allah am the seer. These are the verses of the book and a Quran that makes manifest. We often need a reminder that holding the Quran is like holding a miracle in our hands. It is easy to forget the awe and the majesty of the Quran, since we have been blessed with easy access to it. We have one on our bedside table, and our bookshelf, nestled among other books. It is easy to be unmindful of the fact that these are Allah's words on paper. Why is the Quran important? It makes things clear, open, visible. Allah's attribute of seeing is stated in the beginning to emphasize this point. Allah sees the souls, the innermost of our thoughts, the reality of everything, the past, and where we are headed. 2. Often will those who disbelieve wish that they were Muslims. This verse beautifully connects to the first, telling us about matters Allah knows and sees, but we may not see. Those who don't acknowledge the truth about the reality of the world, also called religion, often wish that they knew it. They will wish that they were among those who submitted and turned themselves entirely towards Allah to get guidance and strength, and then turn to people in their lives to treat them well and act in the best manner in all life situations. Another place in the Quran this is described as whoever rejects evil and believes in Allah has grasped the most trustworthy handhold. And, Whoever assigns partners to Allah, it is as if he had fallen from the sky, and the birds had snatched him, or the wind had thrown him to a far-off place. 22:31. In other words, they are at the mercy of temporary things. In our lives, the concept that being a believer is a huge blessing, helps our faith stay strong, when it is hard to hold on to faith. As our blessed Prophet said, the people will see a time of patience in which someone adhering to his religion will be as if he were grasping a hot coal. Source: Sunan al-Tirmidhi 2260. When I talk to other parents of teenagers and they hear that Islam does not endorse drinking, dating, partying, they are surprised and impressed, and I can sense that they are wishing that they had a faith that gave them such values. The research about addictions to drugs, drinking and gambling shows that there is a genetic component to addiction. The Islamic teaching of staying away completely from harmful things makes much more sense than responsible drinking, or a culture which accepts experimenting with drugs and wild partying, in which a person may suffer irreparable harm, and spend the rest of their life fighting that addiction. Since it is more beneficial to apply the Quran to ourselves than to some hypothetical other, this verse can refer to the times in our lives when we don't exert ourselves to draw closer to Allah. When we neglect our spiritual side, our soul, we will surely regret it later and wish we had used all the precious few days of our lives to strengthen our connection to the Divine. Verse 3, leave them to eat and enjoy themselves, and let false hopes beguile them, for they will soon know. This verse answers the question that, if people wish they were Muslim, why do they not fully submit to Allah? What stops them? The answer is clearly given: it is the allurements and distractions of life. Enjoyment beyond what is necessary to recharge ourselves, and excessive consumption, rampant in modern society, is what keeps people away from an abiding commitment to good. A carefree, casual, fun-loving attitude towards life without seriously considering the reality of our existence is the path to loss. We are reminded in Surah Asr, if we are not actively moving towards doing good, we are in loss, and time is our witness. Verse 4, and never did we destroy a town but it had a decree made known. This verse speaks of the destruction that comes upon groups or towns when warnings and reminders go unheeded. Allah is just, merciful, so He always gives multiple warnings. If we take the analogy of a teacher in a classroom, the test is not given as a surprise, rather is announced ahead of time, and quizzes are given, preparation techniques are taught as much as possible. Allah shares the pains our blessed teacher Muhammad took by saying in Surah Qaf, will you kill yourself with grief if they do not believe? The decree of doom is not some arbitrary judgment, but the result seen by someone who insisted on advancing towards the fire despite all warnings. May Allah protect us. Verse 5, no people can hasten on their doom, nor can they postpone it. Verse further explains the previous point, that the syllabus of life is laid out and we are given the chance to pass through various stages of development, in the hope that we take charge of our lives and set forth on the path of self-awareness and self-improvement. A student who does not do well initially is not expelled from the course or class, but given other chances. Allah, the most merciful of all those who show mercy, gives us all the chances and warnings, even if we throw them away. Once our time is up, the doom comes as a natural consequence because we were on a crash course and refused to change direction. A critical mass has been reached and the time for results has come. There is tremendous wisdom in the fact that there is a time for everything, even when we cannot see it. Verse 6, and they say, O thou to whom the reminder is revealed, thou art indeed mad. A dialogue is often used to show attitudes in the Quran. The first part is an accusation that the Prophet is mad, possessed. Those who speak the plain truth will surely be scoffed at, made fun of, their motives and their sanity questioned. People laugh at and belittle those who hold fast to religion in these times. We have all heard things like, you really believe that stuff? Aren't you boiling in all those clothes? Everyone is doing it, so it's weird if you don't. What? You can't eat all day when you fast? Not even water? That's crazy. Verses 7 and 8, why do you not bring the angels to us, if you are of the truthful. We send not angels but with truth, and then they would not be respite. We see in these verses the impatient attitude of treating religion like an on-demand movie channel or magic show. Making positive change in our life is more like a lifelong science experiment. We must stick with it and be meticulous to see good results. Verse 9, surely, we have revealed the reminder, and surely we are its guardian. This is a very notable verse in the Quran. Among all the carping of what people say in ignorance, we are reminded of the gravitas of the message, and given a promise and prediction of success, that ties into the preservation of the book. I understood the preservation of the Quran on 3 levels. The first level is preservation of the actual words and book itself. We know that the verses were written down as they were revealed, and in the lifetime of the Prophet, they were collected in the divinely inspired correct order. In the Caliph's time, one standard copy was made and distributed. The details can be found in the introduction to Maulana Muhammad Ali's English translation of the Quran. The physical words have also been preserved by millions who memorize the entire Quran, and this is phenomenon unique to this book. It is living testimony to the sublime message of the Quran, which unlike other books, has not been deemed too sacred to read or understand. The preservation of the spiritual meanings is harder than the physical preservation. At times throughout history the spiritual meanings have seemed lost, as was evident from the behavior of Muslims. Allah took care of this by regularly sending saints and mujahids to revive the spiritual meanings. In the 14th century Hijra, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was the one who helped us put this holy text on our bedside table, and to seek depth in its meanings. The third preservation is the hardest of all. It is the applicability of the Quran, even after a long passage of time. There is not much use of a book that we have physically with us, and can understand the meaning, but we find we cannot apply it to our modern lives. Allah has provided for our every need, and so the Quran urges us to reflect on nature, reflect in general on life and its meaning, and to use our rational thought process in the application of this book. This ijtihad, or deciding about new matters in the light of the Quran and Hadith, is a way to find the applicability of the Quran in all times. E.g., most of us have memorized Ayat al-Kursi, or the verse of the throne. We may also know what it means. However, when we recite it after our obligatory prayers, as advised by the Blessed Prophet, do we really understand how it applies to our lives? What concepts are contained in it, that when internalized, will lead us to heaven? Hence, out of the 3 types of preservation, the first 2 have been done for us, and handed to us on a silver platter. The actual Quran and meanings are available. It is for us to must engage in a lifelong struggle for the personal understanding and application. Verses 10 to 13 And certainly we sent messengers before thee among the sects of yore. And there never came a messenger to them but they mocked him. Thus, do we make it enter the hearts of the guilty. They believe not in it, and the example of the ancients has gone before. These words remind us of the human struggles in life, that one who tries to teach and reform is ridiculed, and not taken seriously. Advice from parents and grandparents is laughed off by kids, as if it came from the Jurassic Age. The elders are not immune to the same attitude. Often, they refuse to listen to new solutions and points of view, as if everything new is corrupted and not as good as the good old times. Because of our own attitude, our hearts may become hardened and they become like parched, packed earth in which there is no room for anything to grow. This condition of closed and hard-heartedness remains, no matter how many signs are shown. We need to guard ourselves against this dangerous attitude, and examine ourselves. What is our first response when we receive advice? Verses 14 and 15, and even if we open to them a gate of heaven, and they keep on ascending into it, they would say, only our eyes have been covered over, rather we are an enchanted people. The gates of heaven have indeed been opened for us. The cover of heaven has been removed, as stated in Surah Takwir. We can see detailed photographs of far-off galaxies. The Hubble telescope shows us amazing images of scenes we can scarcely believe. Science has given us a microscopic view of life as well, no less fascinating than that of space. Yet instead of inspiring belief, for many it has done the opposite. The Creator is obscured in the creation. In the last verse, it is said their eyes have been covered. We know from daily life that the heart sees as much as the eyes. If the heart is closed, the eyes are closed as well. If we want to see Allah's signature in everything, we don't really need any extraordinary apparatus. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. William Blake, Auguries of Innocence. Yet those who mock and trivialize things do not have the right mindset to learn anything. It is a refusal to take responsibility for their own decisions, a denial any control over their lives. When life is all about taking the easy way out, it is hard to find depth in it. And it refers to the second verse. That those who disbelieve wish they were Muslims. A time comes when there is nothing but regret for the time wasted in life. Points to ponder: what is our spiritual plan for our lives? Are we going to regret our present attitudes and how we spent our time? Rumi says, work as hard in your spiritual world as in your physical world. Allah has preserved the Quran for us. What are we doing to preserve the Quran for ourselves, to fully avail ourselves of its beauty and gifts? I shall love all mankind.